Many of you here are in the activism space. You have worked in the space. You know that this is not easy. This is perhaps one of the most difficult challenges, and she has managed to straddle the two and combine the two in a remarkable way. To find out more, please read the book. That is my publisher's selling line. But jokes apart, even otherwise, I think it's just an occasion for all of us that we finally have Aruna Roy's memoirs at hand, and we are able to engage with her at a personal and a political level. I will stop there. I will hand over to Amrita, who will introduce Arunaji formally, and the panelists. We have a great panel lined up, and looking forward to this evening's discussion. Once again, welcome to all of you. Books are on sale outside. If you haven't already picked up a copy, please do. Thank you.
Thank you, Udayan. And thank you all of you for coming. I have been looking at the numbers and feeling very grateful that all of you made the choice, the decision, the effort to be here. We see it and we deeply appreciate it. I am Ankita. I'm your moderator for the evening. I have been given the onerous task of keeping things on time, which is challenging, as you know, because activists have been known to challenge their times, to be ahead of their times even, but not really keep to time. So this is my, you know who I'm referring to, everyone in the room. So please keep to time so we can have time and engaging discussion. And I don't want anyone going home and thinking this meeting could have been an email. So first of all, our author, Aruna Roy. I would just say she's the author of the book, read the book, and a long-time activist. I won't say more or I'll get a rap on the knuckles. Professor Neerja Jayal, who is also an author of, award-winning author of multiple books on socio-political subjects. We'll talk to her more about that. She has taught at Jawaharlal Nehru University and also at the London School of Economics. And we have Pamela Philippos, who's a journalist, a researcher, and has held several editorial positions with Women's Feature Service, The Wire, Indian Express. So you'll see that there are a lot of overlapping of roles here, and it's going to be an interesting discussion. We have Natasha Badwal. She's worked in journalism, she's a filmmaker, she has written 2 books, and she writes regular columns and articles, and people relate very deeply to them. And she has also taught media studies and also creative writing workshops. Be on the lookout for them if you're interested in writing. So before I invite Arunaji to share some of her opening comments, maybe we should take a peek at the book if we haven't yet. So I invite all of you to take the book out of the bag, the cat out of the bag, and let it in the open. So then,
Yeah. Close. Ma'am, I please. Still, थोड़ा सा हो जाएगा, बुरा हो जाएगा. Still. बढ़ जा.
Arunaji, I would invite you to share your opening comments, thoughts about the book, about why we are gathered here today.
माइक रख दो ना.
Udayan, thank you very much for putting up with my various procrastinations over 10 years to bring the book out. Sometimes you must have thought, as I thought, that the book would never come out. So I want to thank HarperCollins for their patience and forbearance. I want to thank Kartika, who was there then, who came to ask me whether I would write, and I felt both so humbled and so nervous. I thought I couldn't ever write a book. And of course, Udayan and his team have really kept me going. Thanks very much. The book has arrived in more major part to their understanding and their patience and in propping me up there. To Gopal Gandhi, who's not here, who's written the foreword to the book, a beautiful foreword, and all those who have endorsed the book, making it much richer by their perceptive comments. I also thank the Meera and Vikram Gandhi Fellowship, which sent me to Watson for 5 weeks, which first gave me the time for putting things together in brown. And I want to thank everyone else who's contributed to this book in so many million ways. I'll come to that later and I'll say it quickly. All activists are communicators. Without being a communicator, you can't be an activist. And all my friends, I can see so many of you here. We talk, we sing, we interact, we go on Dharna. Everywhere we go, the idea is to get engaged with people and to convey an idea. So we are, as a group, are talkers, speech makers. We seek public spaces to convince people to engage with us. We are always, however, very, very reluctant to write anything beyond press notes, discussion notes, and petitions. And so this book had to overcome all the various stereotypes that are embedded in me, which I am a victim of these various ideas, and I can see you all smiling, so obviously you agree with me on this. As a result, the book seeks a continuing communication far beyond the immediate geography, both in current location and is naively ambitious in thinking that in time as well. It seeks, therefore, to reach those whom we normally don't reach, and this is something I've learned in the last 10 years, that we haven't reached the people whom we should reach. And it's brought a lot of humility and a lot of respect. India could change so dramatically, and what did I do wrong or did we do wrong? And the internal thoughts and questions that remain companions with us forever, which we never talk about. We always appear confident, competent, outrageous or whatever, but we never take confusions to the people. And I owe a lot to late Dr. Isanand Lakshmi, who told me that the greys have to come out. The thoughts that are unstated are very important, that it's these confusions that lead to clarity, and that there should be no embarrassment about stating that you are confused. And she, in fact, led me to write many of the stories that are there in this book. Well, and the millennial who are being fed stories and superficial narratives, and this word which came to me only in the last 10 years, I didn't even know such a word existed. And that I find that I want to relate to all these young people who will teach me and make me learn more. But the vocabulary is so different. So you have to learn a different vocabulary to communicate. Our generation also has a strength, and I see many of us here, we lived through history. So we don't have to tell them what history books say. We have to just talk about our experiences, relate our various stories, and we get an audience. And I found that every time I wanted to say something, a theoretical argument drew nobody. But a story always gathered people around. So I felt that, like many other things in life, the story is very powerful. And therefore, it has to be one of the ways in which we talk to the young people. Actually, this book is communication, as I said. I'm not an author, I'm not a writer, and I know famous writers are in the audience and beautiful books and great books. So I don't claim to be an author, I just claim I'm on the dais, and I just claim to be a simple narrator, actually. People like me and my generation, we were a few years after the Holocaust. We knew about it not in history, but through magazines we found in our parents' homes or stories that we heard from people. We lived through partition. For us, partition is not what people tell us. We saw when I was brought up in Delhi. So like many others, we found a different story and a different version of how India was divided. So these things, when they become reinterpreted and misinterpreted, there are many things we want to tell people. But I found again that the story has a power to overcome time and hesitation much better than all the other things I had in my store of rhetoric that the activists normally develop. And activism really needs to be unpacked. What is activism? And that's why in this book, I wanted to say that we are ordinary people with our lives. We are not, urban Naxalites. We are not people who are germs or living on the, what are we called? Andolan Jeevis. We are not Andolan Jeevis. We are ordinary human beings, and we are not parasites. But the fact is that we do have something to say, which is perhaps unpleasant for some people to listen to. And in a very, very quick time, we've seen, when I was young and we did this kind of work, everyone was saying, oh, you sacrificed your life and you've done this and that, you've gone to the village. And in 30 years, 40 years time, we've become people who are anti-national. I saw one anti-national person today, and then we are anti-national, we are protesters, we are people who want to overthrow the state. How this quick change came to be is something again that we need to think about, and I have tried to begin the conversation. This whole book is a series of conversations which have no end. It's just opening up an issue and hoping that many more conversations will follow this, contradicting it, supporting it, negating it, affirming it, but there will be more conversations. The title, The Personal is Political, is drawn from a feminist slogan. All my women friends here know that it's been our slogan for years. And seeing the best way of writing about an activist life for anyone in public life. There's a continuing conversation between two parts of a human being, which for me was the most important thing. We never talk about that conversation. What happens to me when I go and protest and I come back, and what are the things, dilemmas that I have in my mind. So the personal and the political is set within an ethical constitutional format forum, and we don't discuss ethics anymore as an issue. We think, well, over the years, we have understood that it's better not stated, so we've kept it under the bushel. But I think ethics is something which rules our life, because we always fight for justice against injustice, we fight for equality against inequality. It's always a quest for something which is beyond all of us and in the realm of ethics. And how do we do it? I can't resist quoting Meera, whom I spoke to 2 days ago, and said, "Are you coming? Will you come?" She said, "Yaar, main nahi aa sakti. Mubarak ho." But then she sent me a text, and I'm going to tell you what she said. Quote, I asked permission to quote. She said, "You can go ahead." And she said, "Modi ji, political is not personal." So I thought I must bring it over to you. As something said by another activist who's suffering the impact of her statements, as are many others in this country. The young have, of course, a closure to all the areas in which such narratives took place. There are no chaupas in the village, there are no addas, there are no conversations, everyone's trapped into these boxes. Finally, this book would never have been completed without Bunker, without Nikhil, without Shankar, without Ankita, without Lippy, without Lakshman, without Swati, without Nachiket, Siddharth, and Sabha, who put me through the book at her cost. Poor thing, she just for 2 years pushed me to write the book during the COVID times when I was so reluctant and I thought I'd just give up and tell her, that's it, I'm not doing it. She pushed me, so I owe Sabha a real personal great thank you to Meera, Pravita, and to Subha, who in the end read the manuscript that Harper sent me, and which, because of its technical complications, I didn't know how to edit. So and there are many more people, but I won't go through the list. But Pamela, Neerja, Natasha, absent Ashok Vajpayee. I want to thank you very much for coming in such short notice. It's the first time I actually remember meeting Natasha. We must have seen each other in meetings, but we have not really met, but I'm a great admirer of your work. Pam is an old friend, and she's been with me through many sagas and many things. And Ija has too. I have known you for a long time through your writings and we've been friends. And Ankita is a critic. She is also sardonic in her comments and always put me in my place. And I think in 2 minutes you're going to tell me, time is up, come back to your seat. So I'll do that, and I hope you enjoy this evening. And you don't think of this work as a great piece of writing, but really as something which provokes us all into making those multiple conversations that are so necessary to take India further. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aruna, for your kind comments for everyone. And we have your readers already with us. So I would like to ask each panelist to share their opening remarks or their first impressions of the book. And also, please, you're very welcome to ask questions of Arunaji. I'm just here to moderate, but if you have your own questions, you're welcome to ask them. So I would like to start with Neeraj. What did you think? Yes.
Thank you so much, Ankita, and thank you, Arunaji, for this invitation to read the book. As I said, I have to speed read it for various reasons. This is really a very impressive testament to an extraordinary life, which I'm sure I don't need to say, all of you are here, that itself suggests that you're aware of how extraordinary this life is. An extraordinary life of public service, and I'm using the phrase public service, though Arunaji has subtitled the book an activist memoir, and she spoke a great deal, as you heard a few minutes ago, about activism. So this is, in a certain sense, it's a theory of activism, but it is about, so activism is the mode through which she has done public service. I believe that what she has done is work extremely hard through the tools of activism to make India a better place, a fairer place, a more just place, a more inclusive place, a more equal place. And for that, we cannot thank her enough. There's also another strand in this memoir. It's not linear like an autobiography, so when you read it, you will realize that. It shows that the world of practice of which she is a part and has helped shape and create, the world of practice for her is deeply, deeply rooted in normative thinking. And normativity is, in a sense, what very profoundly not just anchors the activism, but inspires it. So the commitment to justice and the ethics that she spoke about a while ago, normally we tend to think about normativity is something that philosophers do or people in IIC do, while the world of practice is far removed from it. In this case, in this life and in this book, you see the two coming together, and the cross-fertilization between practice and normativity is really very impressive, very profound, and very moving. I'll briefly mention three aspects of Arunaji's work that reflect these normative commitments. On each of these, I would like to say a little bit about what she has achieved, though perhaps that would not be necessary in this audience, but just a bit and ask her what the challenges in each of these spheres is today. And the first of these themes is citizenship. In recent times, our discussions of citizenship have tended to be framed by the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019. So there have been quite a lot, our conversations have been about the legal status of citizenship and who is included, who is excluded, and on what basis. Those have been our concerns. But there's another aspect of citizenship to which Arunaji's life and work have been extremely central, and it is what in political theory we call social citizenship. The realization of social citizenship in India, to the imperfect extent that we have accomplished it, is something to which her work has been extremely central and extremely important. As we're all aware, she's been a central figure in the rights revolution, as it came to be called, that began 20 years ago, somewhat stymied now, in fact thwarted, but she was one of the progenitors of that. And among the rights that got legislated at that time, there were several rights that got legislated. Arunaji's work was crucially important for two of those rights, the right to work and the right to information. And these are rights that are integral to social citizenship, social and economic rights that make it possible for citizens to lead a decent life, to not want for the basic conditions that might make meaningful citizenship possible. and to be able to belong to society in ways that political equality alone does not ensure, as Dr. Ambedkar told us a long time ago. So this book tells the story of how the demands for these rights came to be formulated organically from rural society, to be formulated, articulated, pressed, obtained, finally. And so the NREGA and the Right to Information Act, as we all know, were milestones in our legislative history. They were enacted, of course, but they were also, they actually empowered citizens, ordinary citizens, in extremely important ways. Today, however, we are confronted by the question of their sustainability. We know that the Manrega, which proved to be a lifesaver for many in the pandemic, which Aruna Ji also writes about in this book, still continues. The question is, should we be concerned that we have reverted to an older paradigm of thinking about these rights as charity rather than as rights, as largesse rather than as rights? In the early decades after independence, as we know, such welfare provision as there was in the framework of charity. It was the efforts of movements such as MKSS that actually made these a matter of right. And today the same programs get delivered as charity rather than as rights, as a sop in the absence of policies that can generate meaningful employment. So how, I wonder, do people's movements respond when the fundamental premise, the sort of the normative idea behind these rights shifts in such a way that you have citizens who are consumers, the well-off, the prosperous, and then those who are not well-off and prosperous are simply beneficiaries and labharthis. Well, how do people's movements respond to this? What are their thoughts? What are they thinking? Is one of the questions that arose. The second great contribution of Aruna Ji and her comrades in the MPSS was the RTI Act, of course. It was a powerful instrument of accountability at every level of governance. And today we know that every form of accountability at every level of governance has been eroded, with every institution of accountability being hollowed out, right? And including the Information Commission. The RTI has probably suffered a harder knock, at least we know of it at higher levels of administration, but we know little about whether the RTI continues to function robustly or, if at all, at the lower levels of governance, whether social audits and Johnson Wise are still held or can still be held and hold public officials accountable. So it would be good to hear more about this. And finally, do I have a minute? Okay. And finally, the question of democracy. In this book, Aruna Ji does reflect on the challenges to panchayats, and as we all know, the performance of panchayats has been mixed. The quota of women has thrown up some wonderful stories, but there are also others which are not so wonderful. Apart from structural issues such as whether funds have been devolved or not, or functions have been devolved or not, there have been attempts over the last few years by state governments to control panchayats in multiple ways, fixing dates of Gram Sabhas, sending down agendas, enforcing a two-child norm, and encouraging no consensus elections. And that model seems to be moving upwards now, with no consensus elections to the Lok Sabha we've seen for the very first time in 2024. So the bad practices or the less good practices from the local level seem to be filtering upwards, and this is a cause for concern. So I would like to ask Aruna Ji if she still sees prospects for robust democracy at the local level, or whether pressure from higher levels has completely undermined the panchayats now. I was very struck finally by something she writes in her book, and I want to just quote this line. She says, ask a direct question in any rural assembly about whether democracy should stay, and the answer is yes. Yet the understanding of what democracy is beyond the vote is multiple and selective. I feel that the same question put to an urban assembly, not this one, obviously, but another kind of urban assembly comprising equally well-educated, well-heeled citizens may not yield the same response. Arunaji is right. A democratic political education, which is something she spends a few pages on, a democratic political education is the need of the hour. But then the question is, is this not a chicken and egg problem? Which will come first, the conditions of democracy within which such a democratic political education can thrive, or the other way around, how one might achieve this, how we might achieve this collectively, I think is one of the biggest challenges of our time, especially because, or not least because, as we've seen in recent years, recent surveys, whether it's Pew or Lokniti, have shown that support for democracy has been declining, and that a majority of Indians are actually attracted to the idea of strong rulers, and some are not even averse to the idea of military rule. So, these are the challenges we face, and I hope the School for Democracy, as well as the project of democratic political education, will be your next great success. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're the ideal leader. I saw the number of posters you put on the pages. Do you want to answer the questions now? Okay. So in that case, if the speakers don't mind going there, because I think some people want to see you speaking. Okay. Then I'll also ask my questions so that you don't have to keep going in front. Kamala, yeah. Pamela, apart from your own impressions of the book, I would also love to know, because you are a journalist and an editor, and in journalism we are always told that we are not the story. Keep yourself outside. And then in this book, what was demanded of the narrator was that there is self-reflection, there is talk of the personal, but also a telling of other narratives. So how do you also see that from the lens of writing?
First of all, it's such a privilege to be here. Share this book, written by a wonderful person with so many wonderful people in the audience. I have interviewed Aruna for major newspapers, and every time I've done it, I've felt a bit like a gold miner, in the sense that I always leave with nuggets which stay with me. One of the first ones was about 14 years ago, and she had just got back after receiving this Magsaysay award, and was a toast to the town. But her feet were firmly on the ground as always. Her saris always immaculate and homespun. And I asked her, why was right to information so important? And she put it so well. If you have freedom, if you have the right to freedom of speech and have no information, what good is it? Vice versa, if you have the right to information and no freedom to speak, again, what good is it? So each actually complements the other. And I haven't come across a more concise way in which these two rights are put together than the one that Aruna told me in that interview. And later, about 10 years later, I met her, even as the India Against Corruption protests were raging, and she was a critique, she had a strong critique of that. But I asked her, you see people all around, they take positions. What do you feel about people generally? And she says, if I did not have faith in people to change things, I would pack my bags and leave. So that was her, her commitment to some multitude that she saw as change agents in many ways through their lives. And it always struck me how her wisdom, the wisdom in words like these, are drawn from from the ground. Aruna with an A, to borrow from Gopal Krishna's, sort of wonderful forward to the book. Aruna with an A. Where did this wisdom come from? And maybe she can answer that, because that would be a very silly question, but a very profound one as well. And I feel it is a combination of leaving places. She's constantly leaving places and making mentors of ordinary folk. As a young woman of relative privilege, she left home to explore the world. She became a lecturer in Delhi. Then she left college to join the IIS with all its share of patriarchy, which taught her many things. And she writes in her book, I planned my future at 21, making a hierarchical shift from student to lecturer, qualifying for the civil service. 7 years later, she left the IIS. So leaving is as important as joining for her. And she left the IIS, and she felt she could do more outside the bureaucracy. The Barefoot College and Aruna Roy at Thilonia beckoned and gave her many invaluable learnings. And then it was time to move to another Rajasthan village, Devdungri, where MKSS was conceived in 1987 and became defined by, as Nita had put it, many struggles for land, for wages, for work, for information. And it's wonderful how each is linked to the other through the work that Aruna does. But Aruna, being Aruna, was also a learner. This needed humility. The humility to take the sharp words of a village woman in Thilonia, who she said, can we have a conversation? She said, you get lost. I have no time for you. And here, there is this collapse. There is no privilege here, because she is now without the trappings of the state. And how do people view her? And she comes across most unlikely people who tell her the most profound things of life. And the first of this were two Dalit women, Buli and Tesar. They embodied the region's culture and the region's ideas. And the region's culture had an immense influence on Aruna's politics. The parables, and here I quote, the parables, folk stories, folklore, historical narratives of local deities, the myths have all helped me understand a community very different from the one I grew up in. The unlettered bard Mohanji of MKSS declaimed, thieves of old, brothers, use guns to kill. Thieves of today use a pen to kill. It is these thieves who rule. It requires humility to learn all this. In a sense, Aruna reconciles opposites through her work, and the most important thing about her, her disparate worlds is that she brings them together in the most amazing ways. Within the structured, hierarchical world of the civil servant, there was a concept of welfare, a constitutionally given concept of welfare. But how could welfare be translated into framing policy for the marginalized? How could thought and action be pooled together? In that sense, her 7 years in service proved invaluable in designing poverty-related public action which demanded engagement with the system. So, in a sense, it was outside the system that she looked for, and she drew from the system a lot of the wisdom from the system as well, and the wisdom she gleaned, not what the wisdom had, the system had. How can one lead to the other? The demand for the right of information began with the engagement for those with public work on public work sites. The demand for transparency and a law for the people's right to see government records was shaped by wage workers cheated out of their wages and unable to see muster rolls. The Jan Sunwai became a tool to bring this about, to unpack that box. when people were witness to the fact that a half-finished building had been falsely certified. Now, when you think of all those bridges in Bihar collapsing, you think of where is the Jan Sunwai in this? And if a Jan Sunwai had been there, would it have made a difference? It's a question to ask, you know. The slogan and the song, both instruments that Arun, Nikhil, Shankar, and so many others have used to draw people and build campaigns, is very important. Some of them come smelling of the earth, really. I remember first hearing Aruna's Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hissa during a campaign in Rajasthan. The other thing that's important in her work is emphasis on women and exploring the myth of the uneducated rural woman. There is no such person. Unlettered perhaps, but never uneducated. Hundreds of women inhabit this book and this story. Experiences like witnessing, Rajasthan was full of women's stories, including Roop Kanwar and the raping of Barbari Devi. All of that happened in Rajasthan. And it happened in times when Aruna was trying to understand the society in which became her own. And threading through all this, it's no coincidence. The title of the book comes from feminist activism, as she explained earlier. And friendships with international scholars like Jill Tweedy, author of the Letters from a Faint-Hearted Feminist. So she brings that dimension also into her work. Finally, I want to say, Aruna had such a funny side to her. Her piquant sense of humor is always alert. The book is rife with these gems, the seeming absurdity of everyone speaking French when she served as a sub-collector in Puducherry, right from the chief minister to the sarpanch. And imagine an English-speaking, English-lettered woman suddenly planted in France. That's how it was. But she learned so much all the way. Villagers' response to men like Shankar and Nikhil carrying pots of water on their head. This, of course, is a serious matter because we know that that women are left with carrying water, and it's a hard task. But the funny part of it is that when women saw Nikhil and others carrying, pots of water on their head, they thought it was very absurd. They must have laughed a lot, but they also felt perhaps it upended their own view of life, And it's interesting how she weaves that into her account. It's the same eye for the piquant that leads her to unpack the nature of labor in a rural setting. She writes, in the effort to work as a daily wage laborer for 15 days, digging, lifting, and carrying mud with unscientific posture, I permanently damaged my back. My failure proved my assertion that this work needed skill. This is not unskilled labor, this is skilled labor. The tagari that she carried on her head, it weighed 20 kilos, and to lift it and put it on her head was impossible. This is not unskilled labor. The same wisdom is brought to bear on a critique of the city dweller. Strangely, she says, the urban privileged get angrier over being stuck at a roadblock for half an hour than over a budget cut or the passage of laws. Inconvenience and discomfort are greater forces driving positions of moral disagreement and disengagement than the corrosion of justice and democratic politics. And I thought of this when I thought of another great person called Dinesh Mohan, who's no longer with us, and his brave attempt to try and tame Delhi traffic. But the inconvenience of the motorists just saw that whole project taken down. And it's exactly that, how do we share our space, our public space? And in these days of challenge, in these days when democracy, as Nija put it, is confronting us and asking questions of us, this election that has just gone by, what has it told us? It has told us that people are listening. People are interested in changing. The point is that the system, and this is outside perhaps the bureaucratic system, but though unfortunately the bureaucracy has also been co-opted into this. And that's a sad part. How do we find a voice to hit back, to push back, to actually ensure that at least in the next election, there would be a genuine, people's election, and not one that is connected in so many ways with power and with corruption. So I'll end here, but I wanted to say this book, multi-layered and encapsulating, all encapsulating as it is, cannot replace another person. The feminist, the organizer, the trade unionist, the singer, and her song. The words, I'm sure, will continue to flow even as the work continues. I think that's where Neja's questions are also important. As feminists say, a woman's work is never done.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Women's work is never done, but at least we can begin acknowledging it, which is something the book does all throughout the narrative. Natasha, if you could share how you related to the book as a reader, and also because you write personal essays, you have taken political stands, you teach media. Do you think we lose something when the two come together? Does one have to give way to the other, or do you think the merging of the two is actually a strengthening of the narrative?
Thank you, Amrita. Aruna has already shared that this is the first time she's laying eyes on me. We have been in meetings before, but I have to start with where my life intersects at various times and in various decades with the work that Aruna Roy has been doing. I was a student of psychology in IT college, and while my friends were applying abroad, I was telling my parents I want to take a break and go into the interiors of India. I want to find out how far I can go away from home and still be able to be effective. I want to learn how to be an adult, but an Indian adult. And the obvious, there was a lot of talk. This is the late 80s, early 90s. There's a lot of talk about Telonia, about SWRC. Somehow, as fate would have it, I didn't go to Telonia. I went to Jhabua. And in Jhabua, working with activists who at that time seemed to be very senior to me, but were perhaps 28 or 29 years old themselves. Amit and Jayashri and Rahul and Subhadra, all of them were connected to Telonia. They were getting these little stipends from there. They had training from there. They would often talk about SWRC, about Aruna and Bankar's work, about how if you want to do anything, Natasha, go there. And I didn't at that point. My work, my life didn't take me there, but I kept following the work. I became a journalist. I became a very, very guilty journalist, full of a certain level of self-loathing, because I thought, oh wow, you've copped out. Instead of working with the people, you're just arriving with cameras to the same homes and getting their story, and just going back to tell the story for the sake of your own salary, for the sake of your own career. And often I would meet the same people that I had met during the Narmada Bachao Andolan in various movements around the country. And they would smile at me every time I kind of expressed guilt about what I was doing. And it took me many, many years to begin to see that no influence goes waste. The early years of having tried to live, when I left home, I told my parents, I'm going to do social work. But by the time I reached Jhabua, I was informed, this is political activism. You have to make up your mind. So, and it was intimidating for me. It was also intimidating for me to hear all the problems of India caused by middle class people. It was a new idea for me. I said, what has my father done that has caused all the trouble in this country? It took me a long time, a long journey to find the answers to these questions. But all of these associations finally then culminated in, when I quit my job, when 2014 happened, and the Modi government came to power, things began to change very dramatically. And I finally found that I was ready to be the adult who could perhaps try to make a difference. And when Ashwandar started the Karwane Mohabbat and I joined it, again and again, there would be times where we would intersect with, when we were traveling to Rajasthan, we met Nikhil, we met Shankar, and many of the people from the MKSS. Kavita Srivastava would organize everything and scold us on the way. The connections that you think could not be made in your life, they don't really go away anywhere. And lo and behold, 2 weeks ago, I get an email. I saw this book. I saw this book on Amazon. Amazon is a clever giant, so they know what books to kind of suggest to you. So when the pre-launch of this was happening, it was suggested to me, and I was like, oh, I'm going to buy this book and give it to my husband. I make him read all the non-fiction biographies and all the political books that come. And I didn't buy it at that point. And then I get an email saying the book is being launched in Delhi and we would like you to be on the panel. And I'm like, I didn't manage to reach Aruna Roy. Aruna Roy has reached out to me. And I must have, all the choices that one has made in one's life must have kind of culminated into this moment where a place that I always wanted to go is now kind of inviting me to be part of it. And the other thing I want to share is that I teach those millennials. So, and I'm teaching a summer semester at Ashoka University where we're talking documentary film and we're also talking narrative non-fiction. So I took this book to my classroom yesterday and I said, okay, what can you tell from the cover of this book about it? And of course they were reading the title, they were quickly Googling on their devices. Some people knew Aruna Roy, they had heard through their parents, and the others were intrigued. And we opened the book randomly on page 91. I didn't have the skill for unskilled work, something that Pamela also just now referred to. And we began to read Aruna's first-person account of trying to do hard labor and discover that there is nothing unskilled about the work that we call unskilled. And it carries on the next page to, astonishingly, the desert is beautiful, but for people living there, it is hostile and unrelenting. And we had read 3 pages, so I said, let's stop and talk about it. And the students said, no, let's read another couple of pages because we are curious, we are intrigued. We would not have run into this book. We would not have found it perhaps, in our own homes. And we want, we are kind of, they were interested. So I have to say that, Aruna, you haven't just been a narrator, you've been a really good writer. Otherwise, there is no way a bunch of millennials, would be so engaged by the storytelling in the book. So that was the other thing I did. What I really was underlining and appreciating as I went on reading this book was how many of everybody's concerns get reflected when Aruna talks about the complexities of activism. When she stresses again and again on the grays, on how political correctness can take you very far away from realities on the ground. And you can't, there isn't always an absolute right as opposed to something else that is wrong. So there's a lot of conversation about confusion, about dissonance, about grace. There's an anecdote about Aruna going to Mumbai. It's much more than an anecdote, of course, for her. She's on her way to Mumbai to address a press conference on behalf of an honest officer, in defense of an honest officer. And she receives the message that her mother is very ill and she's asking for her. And Aruna talks about it over 2 or 3 pages in this book, about that moment where you're afraid you will be judged, where you know that the work you're going to do is very important work, and yet there's a tug at your heart. You're also a caregiver. Somebody is waiting for you. How will you live with the fact, if you don't reach home in time to meet your mother when she's calling out for you, will you be able to live with that? And it's examples like this, it's lived realities expressed in this way that humanize activism for the lay reader. That kind of give you, I give it away. Aruna chooses to go back. She meets her mother in time, and she talks about how choices are always difficult, and yet one after the other you take them, knowing that you might be making a mistake, knowing that you might be doing something that you might regret. But that's life, and that's the activist life, making choices like that every day. There are 2 other things I want to stress very much about this book that stood out for me. It's a book about friendships. Aruna is constantly talking about her teachers, not only her teachers, her academic teachers, but those whom she learned from in the field. So she talks about Professor Ananda Lakshmi, who I then recognize because another friend of mine is also her student, and I've heard stories about her. And the reader is enriched by stories like that. Friendships with Shona, with Shanta Jain, with Northi, Mangi, Bilan. So people she's meeting in the field, people she has gone to college with, people she knows from the big city, and how everything that is being done is actually a collective, and that collective relies on friendships and trust. And I cannot not mention the very joyful afterword written in this book by Nikhil and Shankar. There's a tone, you can hear them laughing and kind of jibing each other as they're choosing what sentence to put one after the other. And that little math that Nikhil has done, about 8 years between us. Shankar is 8 years older than Nikhil, and Aruna is 8 years older than Shankar. And it means something to them. The fact that they can be so close, they can be so supportive, they can become each other's chosen family while they do the very difficult, very necessary work that they have done over the last 5 decades. One last thing I'm going to mention, which is Aruna constantly sharing her influences from art and literature. So when I read all over again about Van Gogh's Potato Eaters, the painting, and Aruna kind of, she brings it on page, she reminds us of how it has influenced her, how the greatest art, which of course, it's so easy to forget that it is anything but very highly priced stuff to be kept in museums and it's a privilege to be able to see a painting in its reality, but what was Van Gogh really trying to say? And the connections that then are made with the greatest literature that we have read, but often only look at as a literary work rather than as a socio-political work. The greatest art of Hussein and Van Gogh and other artists, she quotes poetry. And all of those things is what makes this book so rich to read. Leaves so much with you, and then literally speaks to generations. So my first response really was, why did it take so long for this first book to come out? And Aruna, you really need to write a book every year. And if it took you 10 years to write the first one, then maybe every 5 years. Because of course it gets faster. As soon as one is done, you're probably thinking, that was not so difficult. And you're ready for the next. Ankita, is there a specific question you want me to address?
No, if you want to talk about the writing, the personal political comment.
Yeah, I mean, I am of course a great fan of memoir. I try sometimes not to write memoir, and it's very difficult for me to separate, the lived experience of the self and the engagement with ideas, with the politics of the time. With what others are enduring. Somehow, every time we are able to create that bridge of empathy between our pain and that of the others, between our confusion and that of others, it just becomes easier to express and perhaps easier to understand. So I really am a very, very big fan of memoir, and which is why I think Aruna must write more than just one book, because there must be so many stories that couldn't go into this one, and we want to know all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. I love what you said about how this book is a book of friendships. Also, because these days there's so much stress on making and gaining networks, but I think हम सबने कभी ना कभी तो ये शिकायत की कि यार यहाँ नेटवर्क नहीं आ रहा, लेकिन जहाँ नेटवर्क नहीं रहता है वहाँ भी दोस्त साथ रहते हैं, और बहुत सारे दोस्त आज भी साथ हैं. और अशोक वाजपेयी जी आए हैं अभी. He is an author. He's written over 24 books. He is an art critic. He's a book critic. He's been a chairperson at the Lalit Kala Academy. He's received awards. He's returned awards. He's done it all. Ashok ji, please share your thoughts about the book.
And he's the brave man in the middle of many women.
My apologies. The gray-haired goof up. So I goofed up. I agreed to release the book of an Urdu poetess at the same time. So I was there, I did my bit, now I'm here. Well, in the first place, something about Aruna. I have always thought that three women have emerged in our times as profiles of courage, conviction, conscience, and concern. Well, there are many, but three have become very prominent. Aruna Roy is one of them, Arundhati Roy is another one, and the third is Medha Patkar. And they all, incidentally, are women. These are times when perhaps women have more courage than these male mates. I'm going to use that term, and then I thought it might not be very prudent to do so.
there are all kinds of dreamers, and then some people think their job is to dream. And we have been served a lot of dreams recently in the last about a decade. Dreams on thalis and on paras and on what you have and plates and at the international tables and at the more local dhabas, but dreams. And then there are doers. Very seldom the dreamer and the doer become one. And that is what Aruna Roy has become. She is both a dreamer and a doer. Other thing is, a lot of innovation that takes place in this country is kind of uprooted. It had no roots. So, although it is innovation and it does yield something worthwhile and valuable, but it has no roots. In case of Aruna Roy, she is both an innovator but also deeply rooted. In fact, more rooted than any other, except perhaps Mira Patkar, who was also rooted in some other way. Another thing which also comes through this book, although it is a memoir, it is, the I there is not so assertive. What is assertive is we. So everything that is being talked about, and memoirs have this problem. You see, after all, it is your experience. You always talk. I am currently recording a long memoir, and I find it very difficult how to keep myself away from it. How do I describe what happened with Vilayat Khan when I met him for the first time? Or what happened to Vishnu Shankar Pandit? Or what happened to Raza when I saw him for the first time? So I have to be, my eye keeps on intruding too much, and I dislike it. What is wonderful about this book is, although the eye is there, but it is not an assertive eye, it's not an intrusive eye, and it more or less becomes we effortlessly. So she is talking about friendship. The other thing the book does is restore our trust in the wisdom of the ordinary people. These are times when we are being told, luckily the ordinary people have just now spoken. It is the ordinary people, not the literate ones, not the well-to-do, not the well-placed, but the ordinary people who may be even unlettered, poor people. They have asserted. So as they say, that the Constitution has been defended. It has been defended by the ordinary people, not by those who know the Constitution, perhaps by heart, and do not abide by it at all. So, Arunaji's book talks about, not only talks about, gives copious instances where the ordinary has suggested a way out. The ordinary takes part. The ordinary innovates. The ordinary takes command. The ordinary is able to do something which is for a much larger, after all, right to information. Now is a national law in whatever diluted form it now exists, but it does. So there is this, and I think Arunaji is both a person of grit and grace. There is grit there, persistence, no giving up, and on the other hand, there's a lot of grace, and she wears whatever she has done so lightly. It was mentioned by my previous speaker that about literature and the art, because I'm a person from there, so I'll say something about it. But before that, when she describes joining the Barefoot College, she mentions two approaches which she combines. The Satyagraha of Gandhiji and the sort of feeling of the belief that the structural inequality has to be contested in all its forms, and she takes it from Ambedkar. So this is again, in times where we are being polarized in many different ways, so there has been a great attempt at polarizing Gandhi and Ambedkar. And here is some person who's saying that whatever I'm doing, this institution is doing, the movement is doing, is a combination of the two. Satyagraha means non-violent, insisting on your truth and stand by it. And secondly, by having this sense of structural ability, equality,
changing world, especially when the redrawn with other. Without internal organization, we are not going to do much of the ground. Second letter, this shit is good. Give me time. Time and space.
System
I think downstairs there was a discussion on how to make India a developed
Changing
country.
the Everything I'm saying is, not in the place, much of the trade
Artificial intelligence. Somebody heard the word.
No, he is only taking some pause. And there is an example given by her, says that the recent spontaneous support to a call for medical help and supplying food during the 22 riots in Northeast Delhi, and the provision of food, shelter, and safe passage for migrants during the COVID-19 pandemic was philanthropy. Political non-malevolence has deliberately misrepresented humanitarian action, delivering food and medicine by calling it terrorist or anti-national activity. The rule of law and justice have been derailed. People at large kept quiet and watched from sidelines. This is one of the extracts from his book, her book. Her approach is deeply rooted in culture and an understanding of culture. Culture is often reduced in discussion and even thought to a few of its many varied complexities. And she discusses that, all that. Culture is plural, diverse, and embedded in the lives of the people. It is the subtext of everything in social and political discourse and in activism. Culture is the marrow bone, synonymous with life itself, and therefore the most difficult to define, articulate, or discuss as an entity. Cultural expression comes from a mixture of thoughts, feelings, capacities, skills, and a desire to communicate with each other, establish a connection with the world outside. And she goes on and says, even a specific document like the Indian Constitution is interpreted differently depending upon the group that presents the argument. It has been mentioned that she refers to Vincent van Gogh's painting, then to Hussein. She quotes Himborska, incidentally, whose birthday was there only 3 days ago. But she goes on to talk about culture as politics, the constitution as culture, and democracy as its practice have found some space in many of the narratives. Now, this is for the first time I come across someone saying that culture, politics, constitution, and democracy are so organically connected. They have also believed the literal contradiction between different aesthetics. The cacophony of the DJ truck, with 8 speakers blaring forth a culturally indefinable sound, where noise is a rhythm passes as music, the false dichotomies between high and low culture, the ultimate failure to understand politics as culture. The music of struggles, on the other hand, has energized millions and crossed boundaries. The lyrics by Charul and Vinay, sung in the middle of the Bombay riots, has become an anthem for communal harmony. And such like. He goes on to say, to paraphrase Tagore, human intelligence lies in humanity. Culture as human expression is a wide canvas allowing disparity, contradictions, and harmony to survive within its expansive universe. All our actions are located in it. Conflicts arise when culture is repeatedly reduced to its narrowest expression and identity. Those of us who comprehend the enormity of this universe are bound to recognize the multiplicity inherent in its thought and formations and grow tolerant of differences in perceptions and preferences. There is, however, one fundamental lesson for activists and activism. Political action with a community does not begin and end with a dharna. We have to engage with the community culturally, their songs, their religious beliefs, and their ways of life. Have we engaged enough with the social religious aspects of the people we work with? Why are we not tolerant of religious cultural expression? How much of the political alienation from secularism is the result of lack of comprehension, cultural exclusiveness, superiority, or snobbery? So you see, here is a book which at the base of it is called an activist memoir, but it's equally self-critical. It also talks about the limits of activism. It also talks about, as I said, how people can get engaged into, she talks about Charlie Chaplin, modern times, Victor is now miserable, etc. And about, so it's a book which you must, incidentally, all of you, when you go out, do buy a book if you haven't. You can't just be listening to us. You are here, we are very grateful, but we invite you to a more abiding fare that you get in the book. So buy the book and read it. Don't just keep it in your bookshelf and say that you have a Aruna Roy book. But it is an important reminder to all of us that the battle for democracy, and the battle for equality, and the battle for justice is an unending, interminable battle. No society in the world has achieved that. And yet, we continue to hope, and perhaps after a decade, we seem to be having some crevices from which light seem to seep in, that this battle has to continue. And Aruna Roy will show us, has shown us the way it has to be fought. It has to be fought where it matters the most, not in the air conditions, also the IIC. We suffer from a notion that we are policy makers of this country. We aren't. Policies are being made elsewhere, but people ultimately take over. And it's people who are going to decide what is going to happen. And it is the people who have given this moral glow, as it were, to Aruna Roy. A glow which will last and a glow which becomes a light many of us.
Thank you, Apoji, for having made the effort to rush from another event and still be so well prepared. Thank you. Thanks to all the panelists. I feel very proud of our panel. I don't think we've done so badly in terms of time. Thank you for being such perceptive leaders and also such speakers. Before I ask Arunaji to respond to the questions and curiosities we shared just now, I think people have been looking at the paintings and also asking questions. So to share a bit about the paintings, the artist who's here with us is Aban Raza. And I would, rather than speaking a lot about her, okay, she's an artist sought after by multiple galleries. Her works exist in them, also displayed at the Lalit Kala Academy. She's a curator, she's a filmmaker, she's also a teacher of art. But most importantly, and in the context of the book, her work is political, which is why it aligns with what this book is. So she has shared a write-up, and I would like to read from it, just to give us, just to give you an idea of why she chose to do these paintings. Aruna exists in and for the multitudes that we unsee routinely, but there is Aruna, the person. A woman who exists in a private space when no one is looking. I got to see this Aruna at her house in 2020 and then on subsequent visits. In images I took, Aruna wasn't looking at me at the camera. In such moments, she showed the effects of being tired, weary of the task she has set upon herself. But far more often, when there was no camera between her and me, she was beaming, talking breathlessly about how her house in Telonia was made. She was animated, and for me, she was beautiful. Yes, I saw Aruna Roy everywhere, first in the public spaces, and now again seated on her chair. Aruna appeared not just in herself, but in every brick laid, every object that surrounded us that she chose for their utility, for their value, for their practicality, and of course for their beauty. The most remarkable thing about painting Aruna was that she is, after all, just an ordinary human being. Ordinary human being. Share your comments and
just to say thank you would be an understatement. It's been an evening where all of you together have endorsed my life of 78 years. You said to me today that it was not such a bad life, that it was worth the living, worth the fighting, and worth all the various things that these lives go through. I'm very humbled by the comments you've all made, but to carry on with some of the issues, women in rural India or men in rural India are expected to, just let's take the issue of democracy that you talked about, expected to run a panchayat. When I had to run a subdivision, I was given 2 years training. I had a postgraduate degree that I was taken, I was pushed through, many of them here, many IAS officers, ex-IAS officers are present. We were pushed through all kinds of training. We were taught the criminal law and Indian penal code, and we were taught about how to arrest and how to arrest and how to fire and not to fire. And we still, when we went to the subdivision, we didn't know much of what to do. You are there, I should be. We pushed this woman to become a sarpanch or a man to become a sarpanch. Give them what, in my opinion and the opinion of Nikhil, Shankar and many of my other colleagues here, इतना कठिन काम है, उस काम को करना बहुत बहुत कठिन, उसमें बहुत दूर में कोई दुश्मन नहीं रहता, सामने रहता है, आप कुछ कर दो दिन आपकी मारपीट हो जाएगी, तो उसके खिलाफ आवाज उठाना बहुत दिक्कत है। उस औरत को, उस मर्द को कहते हो कि इस पंचायत को चलाओ, उसको क्या ट्रेनिंग देते हैं? वो ग्राम सेवक जो बैठता है वहां पे इतना चालाक आदमी होता है कि उसको बिल्कुल 1 मिनट में उल्लू बना देता है। He traps that person as the sarpanch into so many extraordinarily difficult positions that the sarpanch cannot function. And have we done a proper 1 year, 6 months, 4 months, 3 months training for a sarpanches and panchayat members? Of course not. So the biggest challenge to our democracy is what you see in Delhi, yes, and what you see up, yes. People who are not born from man are ruling us. But the point is that when you look at people who are normal human beings in villages, you find that they have been pushed into a space where they are huge challenges, but without the skills. Even if they are terribly honest, and there is one story, not in this book, which I didn't bring in, but in the RTI story of this gentleman who was sarpanch, who came to us and said, हम मेरा ऑडिट करो आप। आपके ऑडिट करेंगे तो आप फंस जाएंगे, क्योंकि हर चेक में सरपंच को साइन करना पड़ता है, जबकि ग्राम सेवक खर्चा करता है मगर सरपंच साइन करता है, आप फंस जाओगे प्यार जी। He said नहीं, आप मेरा करो। And Arundhati, she's still here, she came to that Judge Sunwai on that social audit we did, and in that audit he stood up and said, मेरे हाथ में दे दिया ठपाठप, which is the rubber stamp, ठपाठप दे दिया और कह दिया लगाओ ठपाठप, लगाओ ठपाठप, लगाओ ठपाठप। मैं चोर नहीं हूं, मगर मुझे चोरी सामने आ रही है, मगर मैंने लगाया ठपाठप। Such a dilemma. So actually we have to work very hard to make this democracy work, and that's why the School for Democracy, which we have now started and we are working with, is looking at the pedagogy of injustice. How do you fight this pedagogy of injustice unless you do it with new tools? And there are so many friends here, past and present, from the School for Democracy who are part of this, young people who are fighting this battle. You talked about, Ashwabji, my love for visual art. There have been many aspects of my life I've kept hidden. I didn't know I was trapped in this perception of an activist, and I didn't confess that I'd been to Kalakshetra, that I had done Bharatanatyam, that I knew so-and-so. I just kept that aside. I said, that's, privilege. I can't have all that discussed here. So like with art, I actually wanted to do art. My father said, no, I have to go into a graduation, a BA degree. So my love for art is very basic. And when I met Aban, I don't know where she is. Tell her about. She wants to hide. I can't see her anywhere. Anyway, when I met Aban, it was a friendship born between winter and spring, or autumn and spring, winter. And really, now winter, spring, in which the perspective of politics and of perception came together. And it's in that moment of great sharing that we still continue to exchange so many ideas and so many moments of great joy. And I think one thing that is so feminist with myself, basically, that we talk about that we shouldn't be fragmented. All the time we talk against fragmentation. We say we shouldn't be fragmented. That you have to see a woman as in a holistic frame. Why do you see only one aspect of her? One popular thing is, why do you only see me as a uterus? I'm many more things, I also fall ill and have lungs and have kidneys. But when you see me, you only see me as a uterus. These are all things we've used in slogans like. But I'm also a human being. So I can be many things. I can love art, I can love politics, I can like theory, I can like, as you say, the whole issue of ethics and normative life. And I can still be very practical and learn how to make a roti and how to carry water on my head. These things are all part of my life. One thing I tried to bring out in this book was that I am and none of us are, just one aspect of life. And if we did accept it for a moment, maybe we'd make good Democrats. Because we then look at so many other people in our lives in so many ways and work with them. I don't want to talk too much, and I've been cautioned by Ankita that I shouldn't talk too much, so I won't. But I would like to invite some of my friends if they want to come in. Since you said the we and the I keep interchanging so much. So we are a we, and it's this new family of friends that you all, everyone in this room is part of my family, almost. I know all of you, many of you. You're part of my family, and that's where when you see family defined differently, when you see friendships defined differently, then a new kind of politics emerges, and I think that's a big politics. And just one incident, I may or may not have written about it, when we were in MKSS, when once we were taken by the police at midnight, and the information went all over Rajasthan, but particularly Ajmer district, that, oh, they've been lifted by the police and they've all been taken, and not people with whom I generally talk politics, but people who knew me as a woman and we worked for women's rights. They came in thousands and hundreds because they heard, "Hey, Benji ko andar dal diya." Just motivated by love and caring and relationship and affection. I think somewhere that we have to take that into consideration. Natasha talked a lot about it, and thank you so much for doing it. It is very important. All of you said very good things, but I don't know if I have any more time or whether I should really now ask some of my friends to come. अब हिंदी में इतने communication के बारे में बात हुई, शंकर यहाँ है क्या? शंकर बेचारे को जब भी वो कहीं जाता है उसको कठपुतली के रूप में देखते हैं। जैसे ही वो कहीं जाता है उसका सोच नहीं है, उसका विचार नहीं है, उसका कुछ नहीं है। कहते हैं कि अरे शंकर एक गाना गा दो, तो आज हमने कहा कि गाना तो बिल्कुल नहीं गाओगे, तो बोलोगे तो ठीक है, हम कुछ गाना नहीं सुनना चाहते तुमसे, आज तो कुछ कहना शंकर।
कठपुतली लाया मैं कठपुतली तब निकालता हूँ जब मुझे लगता है कि कुछ बात ऐसी कठपुतली ने कह दी जो थोड़ा सामना नहीं करना, तो मैं कह दूं कठपुतली निकाल। कठपुतली एक बहाना बन जाता है मेरे लिए। अरुणा का मैं ये बताना चाह रहा हूँ कि अरुणा का जो है कि एक मैं ऐसे कह रहा हूँ जो दिखे, जो दिखता है वो लिखो, और जो लिखो वैसा दिखो। तो अरुणा वैसे है, वही है हकीकत। अरुणा हमारे बीच में आई, छोड़ दिया उसने IIS, और जैसे ही वहां पहुंची उसके बाद लोगों को जोड़ा, ना आगे रही ना पीछे रही, हमारा हमेशा साथ रही। अरुणा के जितने दोस्त हैं वो सारी महिलाएं और पुरुष साथी भी गांव में वो अनपढ़ है, स्कूल भी नहीं गए। पूरी लड़ाई मारवाड़ी में और हिंदी में हुई और किताब अंग्रेजी में आ गई। हम सोच रहे हैं उसकी हिंदी कब हो, ताकि हम भी देखें अपनी ही बात उसमें लिखी हुई है, क्योंकि ये कहानी तो वही है। और इस गांव में रहना और समाज के बीच में लोगों का बड़ी वो होती है। हम निखिल और हम दोनों साथ उस घर में रह रहे हैं, लोगों ने कहा यार एक महिला आई है, उसके साथ 2 बाबूजा टाइप उसके साथ रहते हैं। तो अरुणा को ये कोशिश करना पड़ा उस गांव में, जिस गांव में रह रहे हैं, तो बंकर को साथ लाई और घर घर जाके परिचय कराई, मेरा पति है, मेरा इसका नाम बंकर। मतलब इस घर में ही झोपड़ी में 2 लोग और रहते हैं, तो अरुणा ने घर घर ले जाके परिचय कराया। और उस दौरान मुझे अरुणा ने एक बार IIS अकेडमी में अरुणा का निमंत्रण मिलता था कि IIS में उनको लेक्चर देना, ये कहना। तो अरुणा ने कहा तुम भी चलो, तो मैंने कहा वहां से अंग्रेजी में होगा, मेरे बस की बात नहीं है, क्योंकि हमें तो गांव में अंग्रेजी समझा तो नहीं, हटाते हैं केवल, रटी हुई तो मैं बोल दूंगा, बाकी मेरे समझ में आएगा नहीं। तो नहीं तुम चलो। तो निखिल, अरुणा, मैं और तीनों गए देहरादून अकेडमी में। तो अरुणा ने वहां कहा, जैसे मैंने कहा अरुणा ना आगे ना पीछे साथ है, तो अरुणा ने कहा हम तीनों साथ हैं और तीनों को बराबर टाइम दो बोलने के लिए, हम तीनों बोलेंगे। तो अरुणा ने अपना लेक्चर दिया, निखिल ने दिया, मेरा नंबर आया, तो हमारे तीनों के एक एस्कॉर्ट लगा रखे थे कि भी ये एस्कॉर्ट आपका ध्यान रखेंगे। तो अरुणा वाला एस्कॉर्ट आया, उसने कहा आप अरुणा रॉय है, आप IIS में थी, उस साल थी, आज होती थी ये होता और ये होती थी वो हो जाता। बड़ा लंबा चौड़ा परिचय IIS का दिया। मैं वहीं बैठा था अरुणा के पास, मेरा नंबर आया तो मैंने कहा, मेरे को बहुत अजीब लगा कि अरुणा ने एक नौकरी छोड़ी IIS की
और आपने इतनी लंबी चौड़ी तारीफ कर दी, मैंने 17 नौकरी छोड़ी। में काम करता था, 2000 रुपया समाता था, पसंद नहीं आया, छोड़ दिया 3 महीने बाद, फिर स्लेट फैक्ट्री में चला गया, पसंद नहीं आया, छोड़ दिया। तो मैंने 17 नौकरियां छोड़ी, आपने एक नौकरी का जिक्र नहीं किया। तो हमारे बीच में जो दोस्ती पहचान और रिश्ते हैं वो इस किस्म के हैं कि हम मजाक व्यंग ये सब, और वही मजेदार है। मतलब ऐसा नहीं है कि आप संघर्ष कर रहे हो तो केवल वही सब नारी लगाओ, वो नहीं, ये ह्यूमर और ये जीवन का एक बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा है। गीत, मैं आपको कह रहा हूँ कि गीतों से संघर्ष और संघर्ष में गीत बहुत महत्वपूर्ण हिस्सा रहा है। तो आप सब जो बहुत सारे अरुणा के दोस्त हैं यहाँ, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूँ आपको कि आपकी मदद भी मिलती है हमें। हमारी सबसे बड़ी ताकत क्या थी, एक पहले गांव में हम मीटिंग कर रहे थे, पूरे गांव को इकट्ठा किया, उस दिन अरुणा और निखिल दोनों नहीं थे। मैंने हिम्मत करके, पहला मौका था, पूरे गांव को इकट्ठा किया। उन्होंने कहा बोले क्या बात है, तो मैंने कहा हम बात करेंगे। क्या बात करोगे, तो गांव में साथी लोग भी होते हैं ना, तो उन्होंने कहा कि मैंने कहा यार ये गरीबी है तो इसके बारे में बात करेंगे कि गरीबी क्यों है। तो उसने कहा गरीबों की चिंता करने के लिए तेरे को क्या मिलता है। उस दिन ये सवाल आया कि यार बहुत बड़ा बात कह दिया उसने। तो उस समय न्यूनतम मजदूरी 11 रुपए थी। हमने कहा न्यूनतम मजदूरी मिलती है हमें, कितना मिलता है? 11 रुपए। कौन देता? मेरे दोस्त लोग देते। रोज मिलता है 11 रुपए। मैंने कहा रोज, पूरे साल में, पूरे साल। हमको नहीं मिलता, पूरे साल तो मिलता नहीं, आपको बहुत अच्छा है। उस बात ने इस संघर्ष को बहुत आगे बढ़ाया। इस संघर्ष की फूंक निकालने के लिए उनके पास कुछ था नहीं। हम न्यूनतम मजदूरी ले रहे थे, वो दोस्त लोग दे रहे थे, और यहाँ बैठे हैं वो दोस्त जो आज भी हमें MKSS में न्यूनतम मजदूरी आज भी देते हैं और अपनी जेब से देते हैं। और वो बहुत बड़ी ताकत है, क्योंकि वो नहीं तो ऐसे मौकों में आपको सब जगह आप रोकने के लिए उनका मौका है कि इनको कैसे। धन्यवाद।
Aban didn't want to speak, and I don't even know where she is. She always hides in the corners. But I owe her a special because she actually made me paint for the Sehmat exhibition. And she said, "You paint?" I said, "Well, forget it. I used to paint long ago. I don't even. I hadn't touched a brush in so many years." And she made me and many of my friends in MKSS and SMD paint for the Sehmat exhibition. So it's been an extraordinary coming together of multiple kinds of human beings and multiple issues. And there's so much more to talk about, but we don't have time. But I think if Nikhil and Sabha would like to speak. Nikhil?
I'll just come in front too. Yeah. 1 minute. So, yeah, 10 years it's taken. Thank God the book is out. Every day of those 10 years, Aruna says, "Should I write?" By the evening, she says, "I think I should write." By the next morning, she says, "I don't want to write." How many of these have gone? How many pages have gone? Have been trashed, God only knows. So they're actually about 5 books. Out of that, this one book, and why this one book was chosen, or why these words were chosen, God knows.
That will be half of those.
Okay, half of those. And even now, tomorrow morning, she'll say, "I don't know whether I should have done this one." Why is my mug on the face of the book? Why is there a painting? Why are Aruna's questions, and a lot of them come in this book, and that's a great part of this book. Aruna often says, not often, quite often actually, says, "Today I want to be an OP." So we know what a VIP is, but an OP is an ordinary person. Today I just want to go to a shop and buy one set of clothes or look at something and come back and be just to aam insaan hota hai. And that was the great fun of actually how we began our work in the assembly, that we were ordinary people like everyone else, ordinary there. And that collective spirit, Shankar gave you an idea of that, and it really has carried on right through. Shankar and I have written that little thank you for mentioning it. We didn't want to be left out of the book. But both Shankar and I can testify that the greatest part of our work, and we've been extraordinarily lucky to have, along with Aruna, such a huge, fabulous family, which extends far beyond whoever's here, is that there's just a lot of fun in trying to do what you want to do. And there's a lot of joy in that, and that joy comes through. I'll end by saying this Aruna doesn't do. Yes, I'm not going to say more. Oh, Nidja's questions, they're not to me, to you. So, no, I won't answer those. I'll just say that someone came and this Aruna doesn't even know, but she just watched Aruna for 2-3 days and she said she really is a Renaissance woman. Because she saw that from morning till night, there was sometime art, there was sometime literature, there was in the middle of it a whole lot of activism, there was sitting with people, there was talk of food, there was talk of everything being in the right place, there was talk of how in art also everything can be organized, or in a house everything can be organized. I think the important part about this book is really it shows that any one of us can do the extraordinary work that Aruna does if we just do it with a sense of honesty and naturalness.
There are thankfully many familiar faces, and so many of you have had in your hands and your hearts pieces of the memories that have gone into this book. We wish we could hear from all of you. Time doesn't allow for that, but if anyone would like to share a specific memory, particular observation, you're welcome to come and share for a bit. Sabha, please come and share the process that you were a part of the book, how you pushed it out at the end.
I don't know about the process, because even though it was 2019, I joined Aruna ji and the MKSS and the SFD and started working with her. And I've written something so I don't go too long. But when I joined, she had told me that she's been trying to write this book for the past many years. And will I help her with it? And I was incredibly excited because I was young, I was just foraying into activism with the MKSS and social political education with SFD for the first time. And I had the privilege to work with Aruna Roy, so right off the bat. So I was extremely nervous, and but soon I understood that working with Nani ji, as we call her affectionately, was not terrifying. In fact, it was exactly the opposite. And almost immediately we got along. And because this book is personal and political, I do want to say that my politics became much better articulated and deeper because of our personal interactions. So I also want to say, as a young person, and many young people from my location and background, especially today, we need inspiration. And we would talk a lot about the book and what is the reason for the book. And a lot of the times, as Nikhil had said, we do away with chapters and why is this necessary? And Aruna ji would question herself. And for me, it was very clear. Everyone does need this book, but as a young person living in India today, with the times we live in today, we need more and more people and young people to think about justice, to think about equality, democracy, and the values that we struggle with internally as well as outside. I won't go as to how it was, I wrote a lot, but I won't talk too much about it. But, there's one part of the book that I really think really resonated with me. And it was about the complexity of activism chapter. And she writes that people wonder how we sustain hope. Cynicism is often an excuse for inaction and comfort. This is a dilemma I feel like a lot of young people face. So if a poor woman with all odds stacked against her can hope, then on what ground of logic do I place my middle class despair? Being hopeless is an indulgence the poor can ill afford. So I'll stop now, but just wanted to say that reading this book will hopefully guide us, especially those of us who don't know how to deal with these times of despair, apathy, tension between living our personal lives and contributing to bettering the world. It will hopefully guide us in that direction. It encourages us to learn, to unlearn, to read, and to keep pushing our politics and our conscience. So here's to actually this book and how it is a small part in building a new world, building a better world, but learning from the personal and the political of those before us.
And I can see that you've also been part of the editing process because you edited yourself. Anyone else who wants to share anything? If not, Nikhil?
Just one thing that I wanted to ask all of you to evaluate me and please write to me. One thing that really bothered me was idiom and language. I found that when I talked to younger people, they knew English, but I spoke a different language. I really got confused. I thought, when I say this, he said, well, what does that mean? So in one of those dilemmas that I was fixed in, I tried to write as much as possible so that everyone generationally can understand what this book is about and not get stuck in the comfort zone of what we have all used as language and which all of us understand. We just give one indication and the rest of the argument is so clear. But it is not so with the younger one. And I think it's a challenge, and I think it's something about language also needs to be talked about and considered by all of us. It's not the various languages of India, but it's English. And there's so much more Americanism and American yes, and English. And so many things you write and think which are words which I have learned. But you also have to learn what we use. And there has to be a conversation even online. So I hope the language is similar and I think Subha is hearing it a one-liner.
मैं एक चीज आपसे पूछना चाहती हूँ अरुणा जी, when you decided this title, the personal is political, when you started, when you concluded, how finally you came to this title of it? Whether it was you or the process, how this was?
वैसे this is आप जैसे जानती हैं, ये तो हमारा स्लोगन रहा है बहुत साल. पर जब मैं पूछा गया कि what should be your title, तो मैं एक सेकंड में मेरे दिमाग में यही आया. तो एकदम ऊपर आया ये सोच और ये स्लोगन, तो मैंने वही कह दिया. फिर बाद में I think I even tried to change it, but they didn't agree. But I found that there are lots of people who written the personal is political, and I got one more title and one more book. So why don't I change it to something else? They refused, and I think they did well. Thank you, Udayan. I don't know where Udayan is.
Aruna, can I also ask one more question? As an art educator, to me, more than the political activism, it's also the passion that is really interesting on a young person and of course. The millennials have been raised, I teach students all the time. I want to present the figure of Aruna in a but there are many very serious challenges that we have to face. Language is just one, but like hyper-consumerism, technocracy, ideological systems. The young people really, the psyches are taken up. And I wonder if Aruna ji was today, she was 20, 21 today, what would move her? To me, looking at you with almost like a personalist passion, not just where can we young people derive that passion? Where our activism is not just behind the scenes, writing such words. Be like you in the ground, being dreamers and doers. Where can we find that passion? What would be our
I think it's I found there are so many young people with me who have discussed. It's a reaction to injustice. It's a reaction to privilege. It's a reaction to inequality. It's reaction to violence. It's reaction to cruelty. It's discrimination. So many things in our society which make you feel uncomfortable. And it's this discomfort which makes you leave. And then the passion comes from wanting to see another world. And those dreams have to last. I mean, you can't get it over. I sometimes feel little dejected because I always pull myself up by saying, can't do that. Because if I stop hoping, then I've given in to the devil. So I just have to keep hoping. The moment my mind becomes hopeless and cynical, then that's their final decision. They're really taking me into the hostesses admin out there. So I have to keep away against hostess. So these are things that one has to be careful about. Subham has come. Would you like to say that one line? About the language?
I really don't know what to say, but I think it's quite ironic that I'm asked to comment on the book because I hardly make time to read any. So I guess that I'd like to believe that makes my comment also quite important here. What I would like to say is that this, being not an avid reader, I've joined MKSS and I've started working with Aruna ji while the book writing process was at the tail end. And this basically, what I would like to compare this book with is Gandhiji's book called My Experiments with Truth, because I find the language quite simple and easier for people like us to understand, for us to comprehend, because we don't usually who don't read that much book, that many books. It becomes more important that the language is much simpler. Thank you.
थैंक यू शुभम। निखिल, आपके पास 1 मिनट है। आप हमेशा कहते हैं कि मेरी 2 बातें, आज सिर्फ 1 बात कहने को मिला।
एक्टिविस्ट हूँ तो ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि हम इस मौके को खोना नहीं चाहते हैं। हम चाहते हैं कि आप लोग प्लीज सब जुड़े रहें। अरुणा को 78 साल की उम्र में, हम MKSS में बहुत कहते हैं कि 78 साल की उम्र में इतना जोश है, तो यहाँ 78 से भी ज़्यादा उम्र के जोशीले लोग हैं और उससे भी कम के हैं। तो प्लीज़ कुछ कार्ड्स मेरे ख्याल में हमने छोड़े आपके चेयर्स पर, यदि आप छोटा सा उसमें भर लें, यदि आप जुड़े रहना चाहते हैं with these multiple campaigns for democracy, for the personal being political, we'd like to use this as an opportunity to keep in touch, not just on our own behalf, but on behalf of multiple campaigns in this country that we are a part of. The second thing we just like to mention, which has got to do with the new phase of our work where we think a lot of you can be involved, is in the town of Byawar. There is a kind of a standee outside if you look at it. It's just started. Byawar is where in 1996 we sat on Dharna for 40 days, and the RTI campaign, the RTI movement in a sense took birth in those 40 days amongst those ordinary people. Town of Byawar, municipality of Byawar, which was a BJP municipality, took a unanimous resolution that the MKSS and SFD should set up an RTI museum in Byawar. And we got land, 10 hectares of land, 1 hectare of land? 1 hectare of land. And we've set up, we put the preamble to the Constitution, which has now become a national anthem, as the first thing on that land. And we would really like to invite all of you to be a part of a living museum, because that's a part of living democracy. So just do have a look at it on the way. And please contribute, we'll build it together. दूसरे लोग श्रमदान दे रहे हैं, आप श्रमदान अरुणा जैसे मत करना, लेकिन दूसरे दान भी दें ताकि वो बन सके really as a people's living museum to democracy.
मैंने बहुत समय बिताया है MKSS के साथ, and one reason I love my time there so much because there were songs there was dance and there was drama, staged and in short. ड्रामा तो आज नहीं है, पर एक गाना है, गीत है। अब्दुल रहमान खान हमारे साथ हैं, प्लीज आए और ओखला से हैं।
Good evening, everyone.
Before he begins, I just want to introduce Abdul as a Constitution Fellow, Democracy Constitution Fellow. So when you work for constitutional democracy, you're not far away from song and from theatre and drama and dreaming and politics and art. These things are not divided in little boxes. So one thing that we learn from Abdul's song and his beautiful words and his music is that we can find different ways of expressing it.
हमारी वक्त बहुत कम है तो बोलने का मौका मुझे मिला। मैं सबका तहे दिल से शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ और चंद शेर हाजिर करता हूँ बतौर खास समाअत फरमाएं। कि कल भी हमने कब छोड़ा आज भी न छोड़ेंगे। कि लोग देश में कहते हैं कि आप देश को छोड़ के चले जाओ। हमने जो कुर्बानियां दी हैं वो हम देश को कैसे छोड़ सकते हैं। कि कल भी हमने कब छोड़ा आज भी न छोड़ेंगे। कि कल भी हमने कब छोड़ा आज भी न छोड़ेंगे। सरभिरी हवाओं से कहते बाज आ जाए। कि सरभिरी हवाओं से कहते बाज आ जाए। वरना उम्र भर उनसे दुश्मनी न छोड़ेंगे। वरना उम्र भर उनसे दुश्मनी न छोड़ेंगे। कि कुर्सियों के लालच में मुल्क बांटने वालों। कुछ लोग अपनी कुर्सी के लालच में अपनी कुर्सी अगर हमको बांटना चाहते हैं तो हम बांटेंगे नहीं। तो इस पर चंद शेर हाजिर करता हूँ, समाप्त करवाए। कि कुर्सियों के लालच में मुल्क बांटने वालों। कि कुर्सियों के लालच में मुल्क बांटने वालों। बट गया तो ही से की कंकरी न छोड़ेंगे। कि बट गया तो ही से की कंकरी न छोड़ेंगे। और बस मैं दो शेर हाजिर करता हूँ तो समझ। जो केंद्र प्रशासन चला रही है तो आप देख रहे होंगे कैसा थाने में जाएंगे तो आपसे सबसे पहले मिठाई के पैसे मांगेंगे। तो इसलिए चंद शेर हाजिर करता हूँ, समाप्त फरमाएं। तरक्की पर है भ्रष्टाचार, तरक्की पर है भ्रष्टाचार। लुटेरी हो गई हर सरकार। कि जनता चीख रही है, कि जनता चीख रही है। तरक्की पर है भ्रष्टाचार, तरक्की पर है भ्रष्टाचार। लुटेरी हो गई हर सरकार। कि जनता चीख रही है, कि जनता चीख रही है। हो नीति जहां पर हमदर्दी, आप थाने में जाएंगे तो आपके साथ हमदर्दी होगी। हो नीति जहां पर हमदर्दी होती है वहां गुंडागर्दी। रक्षक न रही खाकी वर्दी और लूट मार की हद कर दी। हो नीति जहां पर हमदर्दी होती है वहां गुंडागर्दी। रक्षक न रही खाकी वर्दी और लूट मार की हद कर दी। हुए हैं फूल भी अब अंगार, मिठाई मांगे थानेदार, कि जनता चीख रही है, कि जनता चीख रही है। तरक्की पर है भ्रष्टाचार, लुटेरी हो गई हर सरकार, कि जनता चीख रही है।
बुलंद आवाज और बुलंद अल्फाजों के लिए शुक्रिया. Thank you so much everyone for coming and for staying. Thanks to the panelists. You were so good. I'm very happy that I got the moderators. And the books will be signed outside, so please stay and get your copy signed. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, just wanted to take a minute to say that the books outside, we have like just like 1 or 2 copies that already got a copy.
आप हैं ना? मैं निकल रहा हूँ.